Hello, this is Mike Swanson. You're listening to the Wall Street Window podcast. Today I'm going to be speaking with a very special guest. I'm going to be speaking with Carmine Savastano, the author of the book Human Time Bomb, The Violence Within Our Nature. We're going to talk about the coronavirus situation. And ironically, it links up to some of the themes in his book because he talks about how in mass groups we all as humans can react to outside threats with fear and a disgust mechanism, which Carmine talks about. So it's an interesting conversation, and we're going to talk about how big of a risk is this thing actually. As far as the financial markets go, we have seen them take some hits here in the past 2 or 3 weeks. Of course, gold has gone up, and even the mining stocks have gone up. But there's more going on than just the coronavirus. In fact, if we go back to the year 1918 and 1919, now almost exactly 100 years ago, that's when the Spanish flu outbreak hit the world, killed more people than World War I, infected about 1/3 of the global population, and it was a horrible thing. But the funny thing is that during those 2 years, as this virus rolled across the world, the Dow Jones Industrial Average actually went up 80%. Stock market investors did not care about this virus outbreak and all the disruptions it made. And now, with the market falling, and the news of the coronavirus coming out at the same time, I would like to suggest to you that the virus itself is not the cause of the market volatility. What's always important is where is the market in its own cycle, and what are the valuations for the stock market and individual stocks. And what happened in 1918, 1919 was that the stock market was just starting a new bull market, because during World War I, at the start of World War I, it entered a bear market, and valuations were extremely cheap just as the virus outbreak began. In fact, the outbreak of the virus coincided almost to the month with the start of a new bull market. So the market cycle, because it was the beginning of a new bull market, it ignored the bad news, so to speak. It climbed the wall of worry. And think about the past 10 years. How many times have there been bad news stories that the stock market simply shrugged off? Sometimes it would just gap down for a day or two, then continued higher immediately. Now it seems to be acting differently. And I want to tell you, the market is not acting differently simply because of the coronavirus story. In fact, the SARS outbreak happened, and the stock market didn't fall the way it is now either. What is the defining factor is simply that the market had been in a bull market since March 2009. It's either topped or towards the end of a cycle, and we saw warning signs that was some point in the future, because the yield curve inverted last summer, July and August. So here we are, and the yield curve is a predictor, the most accurate predictor of a coming recession within 6 to 12 months. And we also have record corporate bond debt, budget deficit over $1 trillion, and we're not even in a recession at the moment. So what happens when the recession does come? And now we have interest rates collapsing. And all these things you put them all together, and the coronavirus is just one part of a bigger picture. And when it comes to gold, gold is going up not because of coronavirus fears or just because of stock market volatility. Look, in 2008, the stock market fell in October, November, and gold fell with it. This time, gold is going up. Things do not always repeat exactly the way they played out before. So what is going on is that gold is going up as an alternative to treasury bonds. And what's going to end up being a weaker dollar that seems to be starting, but that's, I can't talk about everything. We need to talk to Carmine. But I just want to tell you that when interest rates are as low as they now are, you can't even get a percent on a 10-year treasury bond. There's no point in buying them anymore. And people who, like me, who come to that realization, then have to say, well, what do I want to put this money in? What is else besides bonds or an alternative to stocks? The answer is cash and gold. And more money now is going to go into gold with what is happening in the bond market. And so this is the juncture we're now at. It's not simply the coronavirus as the big news, but a turning point in the financial cycle, the financial markets, the bond market, and the volatility, hopefully, in the stock market will kind of slow down here. We'll see what happens as this week unfolds. But the rise in gold, I think, is going to last for the years to come. So all that said, we got to talk to Carmine. One quick break, and on to Carmine Savastano.
Carmine Savastano, Human Time Bomb, The Violence Within Our Nature, poses significant questions and considers the evidence that violence shapes the past and present. Author and Professor David T. Beato calls it an impressive tour de force. Savastano shows a mastery of relevant work in biology, anthropology, and intelligence. Each chapter will challenge readers to rethink old assumptions. Doctor of Psychology R. Blackstock notes, "It is a long, hard look into the potency of our collective shadow that is extremely relevant in today's socio-political climate." Historian and author Larry Hancock declares, "This work is a slap on the back of the head, a wake-up call, and a serious reality check as to the true human condition." Order your digital and print copies now on Amazon.com. For more information, visit tpaak.com.
Hi, how you doing today, Carmine?
I'm doing good, Mike. Good to be back.
Well, it's been some wild times, to say the least, and it was only a matter of time that your book would connect somehow with some news event going on. And I gotta say, it connects well with the coronavirus situation, because here we are, something that's activating fear in everybody. And as you comment on, the disgust mechanism too, and we all are sitting here trying to figure out, how deadly is this thing? Do we need to change our daily lives? Do we need to stop taking trips? Is it going to cause an economic collapse? Do I need to go to the grocery store before everyone else goes to the grocery store? So here we are in this crazy situation.
Yeah, it's I wish the the timing hadn't have been so on the nose, but yeah, it appears that we're actually getting to see in real time some of the reactions that I talk about in the book happen with people.
Well, there's a bunch of, over the past couple of days, I'm planning on taking, as I told you before we got on here, a trip soon in a few weeks with several friends of mine and family and so forth. And so I've been reading different stories and, trying to figure out how deadly is this to me and what's the risk for others. And in talking with people, it's like two extremes out there. Some people almost laugh at it and say it's fake news. And then I was watching someone on Twitter this morning, a financial person who lives, it's not my friend David Skrika, but someone else that lives in the Caribbean, and he's in the United States, and he's doing an interview, and he on Twitter, and I'm watching it, and the guy says he's going to fly back to his island, and it's probably going to be the last plane trip he ever takes. I'm like, well, this is kind of crazy. So, there's just a lot of emotion, and there's also uncertainty about this.
The markets.
Yeah. Well, even the virus itself, we don't know the actual death rate of it, because the cases that are being counted are the people that are sick enough to go to the hospital and then get tested. So there's countless people that are walking around at this point, because I don't believe this can be contained anymore, that don't have any symptoms, or they just think they got a cold or a flu or something.
Well, and it's like any other seasonal flu or cold. It's like any virus. Any viral infection, there's going to be, usually the majority of people are going to be asymptomatic. You're going to get the sniffles or cough, and it's going to go away in a couple of days. So I think that we have to, I think both of the people that you were talking about, or both of the views, are wrong to, on one hand, say that this is nothing. It's not nothing. That's ridiculous to just, and I understand that health workers might work around a lot of sickness all the time, and that's fine, but this is a brand new sickness to which we have no immunity. So it doesn't matter how many sick people you've ever worked around, that's not going to give you an immunity to this. The only way to develop an immunity to this is to be exposed to it, or eventually there will be herd immunity that'll develop, and with the help of vaccines and other things. So to say that it's nothing is foolish. To say that it's the end of the world, too, is foolish. It isn't either. Chances are, like all things, it's in the middle. It could get very bad. It could be very mild. That's the area that we're operating in right now. But like you said, containment, in my opinion, based on the data that I've looked at, based on a few experts that I've talked to, isn't an option anymore. Containment wasn't going to happen once it left China. And the biggest problem, in my opinion, that I think a lot of people are not discussing, and that might be because of all the censorship that's going on in China and their, operatives around the world, is why did China lie to the rest of the world? Why did they censor the information? Why did they let their own health workers who were trying to warn them be, locked away from the rest of the world? So I don't trust any of the data that's coming out from China. I think that all the data that's coming out from China is probably underestimated because their government doesn't want to admit the repercussions of how much they screwed up.
Well, if we just say that's what's going on. I mean, we don't know the real numbers of the number of people that are really sick. I mean, I don't know how many
most of them are probably asymptomatic, but that doesn't mean we should lose our heads. That just means that it's like any sickness. We don't know the numbers of the regular flu to a person. We're making estimations. We're guessing,
But I came to the conclusion, I was hopeful, honestly, 2 weeks ago. China was reporting that fewer people were contracting it. It seemed to have peaked, and I don't have information that suggests otherwise, but I was watching 2 weeks ago, the director of the World Health Organization give a presentation and say, we can stop it. This is the moment. If all countries come together, we can stop it. And it didn't stop. Within a few days, it spread all over the place to Italy. And then the cases in the United States increased. So there's that elder care facility in Washington State, and that seems to be, a place where most of the people so far here have died. And just a few days ago, it came out that somebody living 50 miles away from me has it, and he got it by going to that facility, and it had been 3 weeks ago that he went there. So he'd been walking around for 3 weeks before he knew he was sick.
And that's another thing, is that people, like I said, we have to try to find some sort of rational middle here, because it is worth worrying about, but it isn't worth losing your mind about. Because largely, no single, like I hear people blaming, in my opinion, based on what we know, what factual data we can get from China, it started in China, it spread as a result of the failures of the Chinese government. So blaming other governments and other government leaders, in my opinion, unless they do obviously incompetent things, is foolish and is just infighting amongst all these other countries. It didn't come from all these other countries. It came from China. And China failed to respond, in fact, acted counter to what the response should have been to stop it. So I think that should not be forgotten in all of this. And you see among China's own people, their own public is mad at the government for their response. So I think that needs to be established. And then we need to say that containment, as you said earlier, is done. It can't be contained. It's out there. It was allowed to escape from China. It has now gotten to the rest of the world. But that we shouldn't allow that to make us fear China, like going to the book. We can't allow that to make us be afraid of Chinese people. There's been cases of where Asian people have been mistreated. They're not even Chinese, but people are just so afraid. They're letting their fear overcome them. The virus is in everyone now. The virus is in every nation, most likely. It has infected every population. There are asymptomatic things going on. So containment's done. We have certain strategies we can rely on, which we rely on for all the other seasonal flus, which is herd immunity, vaccines, and treatment. That's what we should be focusing on now. And everybody is out there, like we talked about with the disruptions. The reason why disruptions in the supply chains thus far, the disease could get a lot worse and then cause some, but right now, the only reason there's going to be a disruption, I would contend, in any of the supply chains is because of people letting fear and disgust overcome them. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When 2 weeks ago, there was everything on the shelves all over the United States as far as medical supplies and bottled water and all these staple items that everyone takes for granted. As soon as the virus started to appear, the shelves started going bare across the country in different places. Even as far as here in Michigan, I know in California and in the coast, they've already gone bare. But there are people, and I think that's from a number of people buying, but among the most buying is greedy people who are now buying up staple supplies so they can sell them at increased prices, and people who are just letting fear overtake them and thinking they need to stockpile. But what they don't understand is if they buy up everything, when everybody else comes to get them, that's going to create the shortage. So there are people actually trying to make these shortages happen so that they can make money.
Oh, sure. People, when they see chaos, will find some people will look for some way to benefit. But then on the other hand, I wonder, how does this, is this, like these people I know, some people that think this is fake news or something. On the other hand, I wonder how deadly is this compared to other diseases. For example, I went and looked, and during 2 years ago, the 2017 to 2018 flu season, 61,000 people died in the United States from influenza, and at the peak of it, 4,000 people were dying every single week. And that wasn't, big news. Now, over the past 2 weeks, what is happening is every single time somebody gets sick or someone dies, it becomes a breaking news story. So that does drive anyone, all of us, watching the news and looking at our phones and seeing the headlines. It makes you get scared.
Yeah.
And it drives hits to the website.
Which is just another reason not to be on your phone more than you need to.
Well, one story that popped up, and I'm going to link to it with the notes for this. Not the first story I saw. The first story I saw had a headline. It said, Amtrak suspends New York to D.C. route due to virus. And when I saw that, due to coronavirus, when I saw that, I thought, oh my goodness, Amtrak is stopping all their trains. And then I wondered, is that really true? So I went to Google News and did a search, and I found another story that explained it in further detail with a different headline. And their headline is Amtrak suspends nonstop DC to New York City ACL service. That's one train route as virus fears cut demand. So they weren't stopping the trains out of concern of the passengers getting sick, but because people are now, not taking the train anymore, this one train route, which is pretty interesting in itself, a sign of how this is impacting social behavior and the economy.
It's more that self-fulfilling prophecy. You have the uncredible outlets pushing this as a nightmare and apocalyptic scenario to try to get more hits and make more money. It's the same thing as the people who are buying up staple goods. They're blowing it out of proportion to make money. They want to scare the public even more beyond what reasonable fear would be, so that you'll pay more attention to their outlet. And you can see that now. Remember, I don't know, this is way back months ago on the show. I said that what I would give for something to just take Donald Trump's name out of every headline. Well, it's almost happened. The coronavirus has almost done it. He's almost out of every headline.
Well, that's the thing.
So,
we live in a culture that likes to be afraid. You know, there's always a figure to be afraid of. If it's for
it's really overly judgmental too at this period in history.
Yeah.
So everyone loves to judge people, so they want a villain to blame for all their problems, and the coronavirus is now filling in.
Yeah. Well, that's a little bit I agree with Chuck when, you know, his view of it seems to be that, and I think this is true, it'll be a whole nother discussion and kind of getting off the topic, but I think the virus is going to be blamed. This is what he was saying, and I agree with him. If the economy goes into recession or the stock market continues to go down, any bad thing that happens will be almost solely blamed on this. Well, I really believe. I think I could see that happening.
Well, I could see it happening, but you can't. At the same time, I wouldn't underestimate the power of this virus's effect on the economy.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I mean, it's fine to say that you can't blame everything on the virus, but look at the reaction to people, and here's where I guess I disagree in a way about that, because look at the media. They're just pumping out coronavirus story after coronavirus story, updates about updates where there's no new deaths. So they're doing this on purpose. Whether or not they understand they're being controlled by their fear mechanism, they are. So we can't allow ourselves to fall into the same trap.
Well, let me read this to you and see what you think. I mean, this is the question. The question all of us have is how much does this personally affect us, or family members we have, and what's the real threat? And I'm going to link to this. It's a story from CNN, and this story is about CDC, Centers for Disease Control guidance, and that they are saying they interviewed, they cite the guidance, link to it. Then they interview somebody that says there is a doctor who's an advisor to the CDC, and he says 2 groups should consider avoiding activities such as travel by airplane, going to movie theaters, attending family events, shopping at malls, or going to religious services. The top of my mind are people over 60 and those with underlying health problems such as heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, compromised immune systems. The article suggests that if you don't fit in those categories, you're younger than 60, don't have any health problems, that the risk of actually dying from this is very low. But the article ends with this. If a grandparent wants to attend a grandchild's wedding, they could sit off to the side and bump elbows with relatives instead of hugging and kissing. But someone might want to avoid, for example, a regular weekend religious service. Don't go home. Be reverent at home. They're almost saying be a shut-in.
Well, no, but they're also saying, the thing that they're saying, I mean, that's one way to look at it, but I think another thing they're saying is, well, they can bump elbows. No, it's a virus. People sneeze. They wipe their face. It's going to transfer to you. Don't go. That's the answer. I understand, and like I told you, I'm dealing with this with members of my family. Where they want to go to events with people that are sick, and I say, don't go. You just can't go. They're like, well, I really want to. Well, who cares what you want? Do you want to be sick? That's the big question. It's like, people, they're asking for answers, and then they don't want to listen. When you give them the rational answer, the rational answers are what they've always been. The same for every flu and every virus that's ever existed before. Wash your hands. Cover your mouth when you sneeze. Don't touch people you don't know. Don't go to big events because people could be sick and they could be asymptomatic and they could be passing it to everybody and nobody knows. At CPAC it happened. At the Republican, it's there, guys. Sorry. Well, containment is done. I don't know why, and that's why the travel restrictions make sense for older people and people with underlying problems. Sure. But for most people, they don't because it's too late. As soon as the Chinese New Year happened and all those people came back and all the cruise ships started docking off the port of America, it's here. Okay? People have it. It's all over our communities. That's it. So now what we can do is we can try to mitigate the damage. And like I said, I think the UN should look into why the hell China did what they did, what they still aren't telling us, and maybe the world needs to discuss. Maybe I've heard a lot of bad arguments against globalism, but this might be the best argument I've ever seen against globalism. Because if you are globally interdependent all the time, if something like this happens, you can't protect yourself and you can't get essential things your country needs because another country's sick. That's why globalism isn't probably a good idea in all respects. Because there should be some things that your country can do for itself without needing other countries.
Well, but I still wonder, the advice, don't be around sick people, and if you're older, don't travel. How is it?
Well, it's containment.
Yeah, no, I know, but I mean,
yeah, it's personal containment.
How is the risk any different?
Yeah.
Than the flu or catching pneumonia or anything else?
No, I would think it was comparable at the very least, and I think first of all, like I said, I don't think that we all need to, run around like a chicken with its head cut off and screaming that the sky's going to fall. I don't think that's going to. First of all, let's say the worst case scenario happens. What is panicking going to do? Besides make everything even worse. So even if we're going to face the worst case scenario, we have to keep our heads if we want to be okay. And if the best case scenario happens, then we don't got to worry about anything. But I don't think it's going to be either of those things. It's not going to be the worst. It's not going to be the best. It's going to be in the middle. And honestly, I'm not, everybody's freaking out about this initial wave. This isn't the one to freak out about. This is probably actually going to be pretty low as far as the numbers. The thing that'll be to be concerned about is like when you look back in 1918 at the Spanish flu, because this is a cousin to the Spanish flu. That came from a sick pig, and this comes from other sick mammals.
Honestly, that was a thought I was having, because I have some trips planned out over the next few months, and I was thinking that this will probably, I was thinking exactly what you're saying, that this summer won't be that bad.
No, because usually the heat kills viruses.
Right, and then they come back in the fall, and as you're saying, the history of the Spanish flu was that second wave. It actually had 3 waves, but the first wave wasn't that bad, and then the second wave was devastating, and the flu season really starts in late September, in some parts of the country, but by October, by October, November is when it really kicks up. So my thinking, honestly, was, well, I have some trips planned, and okay, and after that, once September comes, I just won't fly anywhere. Next spring. That's what I was thinking to myself. I'm not going to worry about now, but next spring I'll just and even if we're wrong about it dying out, coming back, or whatever, it'll pick up over time. So this is just the start. It'll be worse later.
Well, it's a mutating strain, so there will be other versions. This isn't just the end of it. Like what they were hoping with containment, according to some of the sources that you sent me that I read, what they were hoping with containment earlier on is that this would be like SARS or MERS, and they could just contain it in Asia, and the microbe would die, and that would be it. We would never have to deal with it again. But this one, because of China's actions, got out and spread to other areas so that it can't be contained. So now it's going to become, I think it was the John Hopkins specialist, the specialist on infectious diseases in one of the sources that was saying that they knew that. Pardon me, one sec.
Sure.
It's allergies, don't worry. Anyway. So they were saying that respiratory viruses are especially difficult to control, so it's possible that the outbreak ends in the virus becoming endemic. So the coronavirus has already spread largely beyond the ability of containment, and it's going to possibly permanently reside in some nations. So China might have this forever. This might become a regional disease, a regional virus that stays there forever. even worse, which is also just as likely, is it becomes permanent as a fifth flu. So not just China, everybody gets it every year. So this might be a permanent addition to the seasonal flus that always go around.
Yeah.
And that's where, future danger lies. And so mitigating it, creating herd immunity, vaccines, and treatment are the most important tools we have. Those are the things we should be developing right now and focusing on. We shouldn't be focusing on locking down places, which they're still doing. Another thing I see in these videos where I'd love to just reach my hand through the screen and slap the official that ordered. When I see this on TV, if you notice in China and in Italy and a bunch of other places, they're spraying anti-infection mist.
Yeah, I don't understand what that does.
It's a waste of time. It's a show. They're just trying to make it look like they're doing something instead of actually doing something useful. So they're wasting money and resources and manpower when we need them at hospitals. So, hey, guys, if you want to have a little show for yourself, do it afterwards. Right now, we need you to get some more people to hospitals. It's a waste of time. I swear to God, because I called a couple medical professionals and asked them what. They're like, nothing. That does nothing. That is window dressing because they want to look like they're doing something.
Well, I mean, the premier, the leader Z of China, I mean, they have a huge, just like any government, PR system. So
yeah, they're trying to Lysol cities is basically what they're doing. Good luck. Good luck with that. Yeah. You got a really big rag so you can wipe the skyscraper down, you morons. What are you doing? It's so infuriating when I see that. It's just a waste of resources that could be used elsewhere.
Well, there was one story I read it. I couldn't find it, but I read it in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago, maybe Saturday. And it was making an argument that this Cornavirus, it had a list of all these other ones, over the past 30 years. And it was making the argument that these things are simply going to keep happening.
Yeah.
Because they're a part of the growing global population and urbanization.
Well, and
it's just going to keep happening.
Another thing that I think no one wants to think about, but is a reality, is these are part of Earth's defense system against us. This is how the planet protects itself from us overpopulating. We all seem to be under the delusion that we can endlessly populate this planet with no consequences, and that we can endlessly extend lives spans with no consequences. But there are consequences because there's limited resources and there's limited space. So when you start packing people into countries, billions of people in little houses, diseases are going to occur. It's a natural defense mechanism of the environment.
Well, that's one thing I was thinking about too, is about why this isn't going to, I don't think this is going to be the Spanish flu that happened after World War I. It is
the mass wars.
Yeah, exactly. So in fact, in the Civil War, more people died from sickness too than fighting, because what was going on, and it happened in World War I, even to greater, it was part of the reason the thing even happened and spread, is they had these huge camps, tens of thousands of people in them. Even in Vietnam or World War II, or the Korean War for that matter, you didn't have, mass camps of 100,000 troops sitting around like you did in the Civil War.
And they didn't have,
and they didn't have the medical stuff. But where the city I live in now, Danville, Virginia, it was used as a depot during the Civil War, and they're still there. These abandoned old tobacco warehouses. They used them to house 10,000 prisoners, Union prisoners, and 1,700 of them died. And this was going on throughout both the Union and the South in these Civil War camps, because they were packing these people in, and they were getting these diseases and just passing them on. So that was a big part of the World War One Spanish flu epidemic was, the war conditions and similar things happening, and we don't have that, but we do have wars, we do have displaced populations, and it's
the potential is there. I think the potential for a recreation of the Spanish flu is there in Europe and in Asia, because you do have, well, like you said, we do have some more modern health systems in place now, and we do have some more modern ability to at least contain damage. The problem is that, like you said, right now we have millions of people flowing from Turkey into Europe from Syria, with, I'm sure, infections in there somewhere. And then you're going to have just normal population flow that's going to spread it. And that's where I think that the second wave can really hurt some people. And, it could get over here too. But it's really through that immigrant population, through the wars that are ongoing in that region, plus the inability of the governments to react properly, to contain it early on, to stop travel early on. Like, now it's too late. I don't even know why they're stopping travel. Now it's already been spread. There are people that have, like the Princess Cruises. There are people that are back in the United States that have been spreading it could be as early as January. So we need to now focus on hygiene, sanitation, using the good health system we have to protect us. That's why we have it. But we shouldn't freak out about it. We should go about it in a reasonable way. Most people don't have to worry about this. The people who are most at risk, try to take care of them with, extra help, support. But you're going to have to make some decisions that you might not want to make, like not seeing people for a few weeks. If you want to give this, because, people are talking about, well, 14 days and you're fine. No, that's not the case. In some cases, it goes asymptomatic for 27 days. So if you want to be maximum safe, you don't associate with 6 people for 28 days. And I know there was that movie, which is hilarious. But don't worry, we're not all going to turn to zombies.
Well, there's all kinds of funny coincidences. Well, one thing I'd say is I've played in lots of poker tournaments, and you're around a lot of people, and people are sick. So I'm sure
that's a perfect environment.
But I've never gotten sick. And what I do when I play these things, or I always have done, is every hour I go and wash my hands.
Yep.
And however, I've gotten sick traveling on airplanes. So
because there's nowhere to go. You're just trapped. I understand that too. Why a lot of people shun air travel, just because. Well, and here's the thing. What really kills me about the airplanes, this goes back to, and I don't know if they've changed this policy, but most likely they haven't, so they could save money. When they used to have smoking on airplanes, that's how old I am. I remember my grandfather smoking on an airplane. I was never old enough at the time to smoke, but they used to have them go to the back of the plane, like in a smoking section. Like it mattered. Yeah, like it mattered. Because we were in this little steel tube. But what they would do is they would ventilate the plane more to let the smoke out and to clear the air.
Okay.
But now, to save money, after they ban smoking, they don't do that because it's more resistance, thus more gas. Mm-hmm. So now they just trap you in there with the sickness when they could ventilate it if they wanted to, give everybody a better chance of not getting sick. So it's little things like that increase our chances. It's just it's preventative stuff that we can do. We shouldn't go crazy about it, but we also should not take it seriously. It's serious. If you are over a certain age, or you are younger and have underlying medical conditions, and you have a compromised immune system, you need to take this seriously.
Yeah.
You need to protect yourself, but don't go crazy about it. It's not the end of the world, but it's not nothing. And unfortunately, based on some of the references that Mike's going to include with the podcast, some of the specialists, the viral specialists, are saying that this might be a permanent thing. This might be every year. So we can't just have the stores emptying every year. We're going to have to develop a strategy to deal with this. And if there are, and future waves likely being worse, if this goes similar to the Spanish flu, then we have to start building that. Like I said, herd immunity, vaccines, treatments, and just take basic steps to keep yourself clean. Hygiene, good hygiene. But unfortunately, if it doesn't go into becoming a permanent fifth flu, and it does become endemic, and it's only in certain nations, there's going to be certain nations that nobody's probably going to want to visit much at all. because they're going to have a population that continually is suffering waves of this. You know, it might be asymptomatic for the most part, but older people are certainly not going to want to go to those countries.
Well, I saw a map a few hours ago of all the countries that have cases, and now almost the whole world is red,
Yeah.
except it looks like
probably.
the biggest country that says it doesn't have a case is Turkey. But you believe that's hard? I don't believe it.
I don't believe that for a second.
I don't.
Based on their regional placement, are you kidding me? They're letting people flow in and out of Syria in a war zone. No, they're lying.
I don't believe him. That Turkey
Erdogan.
Yeah, it's
second. Yeah, he's about, in my opinion, he's about as reputable as Z is, which is not at all.
Well, what do you think of Putin? Do you like some of these leaders that they're all just crazy?
Well, I think that they all are liars. But I do apply that to most of the leaders in the United States too. So don't think it's that I just don't like authoritarian leaders. I don't like a lot of leaders because they don't tell the truth. They don't, and I think that it's an insult to our collective intelligence as the public when they lie to us. I don't like to be lied to, especially when it's so obvious.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and in this case, we have the facts. We know that Xi and his government lied. We know that the blame, which I don't think, you can't really, if this is just a spontaneous, because, and I'll go into this, and I know we got to end in a couple minutes. So, where this came from beyond China, we don't know for sure. I think it's within the realm of possibility that this could have been incompetence, that this could have been, just a spontaneous generation of this disease. It could have been a lot of things. But that nothing was done about it for so long can't be argued. There is no lack of clarity on why it happened, on the steps that were not taken purposefully to deny it. So what we need to worry about in the future is this happening again? Because we're going to get more diseases as a natural occurrence. But if these authoritarian countries like China decide that they're going to lie to the rest of the world and let them escape, and the rest of us have to deal with them with no prior foreknowledge because they were quiet, they need to pay a price. There needs to be some sort of consequence to doing that. Because China has a very large population. So chances are they're not all going to die.
Watch that movie came out. I mean, now it seems relevant, that movie Chernobyl,
Yeah.
that came out last year. Everyone should watch that, but that's, sort of incompetence of these authoritarian systems, is just part of what that movie's about.
Well, and it extends to democratic systems too. Look at Japan with Fukushima. Eventually, I think it's 2022.
Yeah.
They're going to run out of places to store the radiated water, and then they're just going to start dumping it into the ocean.
Sure.
So then the rest of us get to have it. Thanks, guys. So this is an incompetence across the board with governments on critical issues that nobody's paying attention to. Like I haven't seen Fukushima in the news cycle in years, and there is just as much radiated water pumping out today as there was years ago.
Well, that's one thing I wonder about this situation. Now it's all in the news and everyone everywhere. But if this thing comes back, and stays with us, and those people were theorizing could, then let's just be a forgotten thing like Fukushima, and it's just something we all live with,
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it'll be referred to as the China virus in my house until I'm dead.
Okay.
Because that's where it came from. If anything comes out of this, let's remember where it came from and why it happened. Because essentially, this could have been a very little problem contained to just Wuhan if they would have reacted in December when they were told. This didn't have to become a pandemic. But they chose to be quiet. And it goes to show you, when we talk about politics and other things on this show, censorship isn't just an existential political threat. It's a physical threat. Because censorship can hide the truth, critical truths about medical conditions. So that's one of the biggest reasons why censorship should be decried.
Well, that might be a good thought to end our discussion on, and I tell people to grab your book, because you have chapters in your book about the Soviet system and
a lot of this
so forth.
fear and fear and
Yeah.
disgust.
And it's good. So thanks for taking the time to talk to me tonight about what's going on in the world on these issues. Goodness.